It feels like it's been forever since I first played the Coromon demo, but it's only been 2 very long years. I've been keeping tabs on this game for a long time, and that shouldn't be a surprise if you've been following my channel for a while. Not as long as it took 2 ridiculously ambitious guys to get to this point, however. The concept behind Coromon dates all the way back to 2014, and it was only 2 years later that they formally established the studio, Tregsoft. You know, 2 ridiculously ambitious guys soft. Since then, the team has grown quite a bit, and this year all their work has finally bared fruit, at least on PC. The Switch version got delayed days before launch, and the full Android version still isn't available as of writing, but hopefully it won't take long until you can get these monsters in your pocket. Coromon begins with your mom waking you up so that you can start your exciting new life as a corporate slave working for Lux Solis, a massive corporation that develops all kinds of technology. Once you're done customizing your avatar with a bunch of hairstyles and clothes, it's time to have some breakfast and leave for the Lux Solis campus. Don't worry, Mom, alcohol will keep you company. Over on the campus, the receptionist finishes your registration as the company's new battle researcher. Here you get to choose the difficulty, either by selecting one of the presets or by customizing multiple options to fine-tune the game to your liking. You're also given a high-tech gadget called the Gauntlet, an essential tool for anyone working at Lux Solis. It has multiple functions, but the most important one is that it lets you tame the titular creatures. The game takes place in Velua, a world where humans live alongside creatures called Coromon. Your mission is to raise your own team of Coromon and engage in battles with others. The data you gather is then automatically sent back to headquarters through the Gauntlet. You even get rewarded for it. But before doing all that, you need to actually have a Coromon to begin with, and a rather eccentric staff member gives you a choice between 3. Nibelgar, the water-type shark, Torga, the fire-type turtle, or Cub-Zero, the ice-type bear. Once you've chosen your partner, you get a quick tutorial battle, and then you're set free to explore the Radiant Park, a beginner path right outside the campus. But it won't be long until you arrive at the Research and Development Lab, where the main plot truly kicks off. You're introduced to Rigel, the head of the facility and leader of the Titan Task Force. He explains that recently strange objects called Titan Essences have begun appearing, and this task force is in charge of researching their mysterious properties. He believes that they'll be able to discover the true power of these essences once they've gathered samples of all 6 of them, which are guarded by the 6 titans who live in Velua. These powerful beings are capable of manipulating the elements, and you're sent on your merry way to establish contact with the first one and collect its essence. Things get complicated when a bunch of weirdos who speak backwards appear, also wanting to find and take the essences for themselves. So you better hurry up and find them first, before everyone gets mildly inconvenienced. Your visit to the lab also unlocks your first Gauntlet ability, and these abilities will be essential to clearing the many obstacles scattered throughout the world. Wouldn't want to get your precious little hands dirty, would you? It's no exaggeration to say that you'll be spending almost as much time in battles as you will be solving all kinds of puzzles and other challenges. Flick the switches, move the walls, roll the logs. But as for the battles, you get turn-based combat where the titular creatures fight mostly 1 versus 1 battles, and victory earns you experience points. Once they have enough, Coromon will level up, increasing their stats, potentially learning new moves to use in combat, or even evolving into a more powerful form. It even happens in the middle of a battle. Wild Coromon can be found in tall grass and caves, and then captured with items called spinners, which come in many different types with various degrees of effectiveness. You can carry up to 6 Coromon at once, and catching any more will give you the option of replacing one of your current members or to send the new Coromon to the PC storage found in trainer hubs, which are located in towns and will also restore your party to full health at no cost. Coromon are all assigned a single type, and this determines what skills they are weak or strong against. While the game features 13 types in total, 6 of them are exclusively used by skills. Coromon can only have 4 skills enabled at once, but you're free to simply toggle any they've learned on and off. Items called skill flashes also teach skills to compatible Coromon, and they can be used as many times as you want. Besides their type, power and accuracy, skills are also categorized as either physical or special, and that determines which stats are used to calculate damage. Physical skills use attack and defense, while special skills use special attack and special defense. But keep in mind that skills also cost a number of stamina points, and naturally stronger moves use more. If you run out in the middle of a battle, you'll have to spend a turn recovering or switching to another Coromon, both options leaving you open to attack. Each species of Coromon also has a couple of possible traits, one of which is randomly selected when they are encountered in the wild. These provide passive bonuses in battle, and some even have secondary effects while exploring. Coromon are also able to hold one item at a time, such as fruit to recover HP or to heal a status effect when needed. Most battles will be against wild Coromon or trainers with multiple party members, but there's also the fights against the titans themselves. These battles break the conventions of regular battles, and are easily the toughest in the game. They have a ton of HP, they aren't limited by the maximum of 4 skills per Coromon, and they will pull various tricks on you, so you need a full party to bring them down. Finally, if you're willing to dig yourself into a competitive rabbit hole, there's the potential system to tinker with. Basically, every individual Coromon has a random potential value, ranging from 1 to 21. From 1 to 16, the Coromon is classified as standard, from 17 to 20 it's potent, and the maximum of 21 means it's perfect. When Coromon gain experience points, their potential bar will also increase, and whenever you fill it, the Coromon gets 3 points to freely distribute among its base stats, up to a maximum of 60 points for each stat. The higher the potential, the more points that Coromon can get, so to maximize your competitive advantage, you want Coromon with as high of a potential as you can get. Potent and perfect Coromon also have unique colors, so even if you don't care about competitive battling, the aesthetic and completionist factor is still there. Unfortunately, there is currently no way to freely change colors, so if you prefer a different palette, well, tough luck. Based on my channel analytics, I probably don't need to tell you that Coromon is heavily inspired by Pokemon. I just did, but the point that I want to make is that this is something that you can't detach from it, both in terms of gameplay and in the context of the discourse surrounding the series. Coromon straight up lifts a lot of elements from the mainline Pokemon games, down to the numbers being the exact same. Fast Strike is Quick Attack, Menacing is Intimidate, HP Cakes are Potions. I'm almost surprised it hasn't gotten the good old C and D from Big N. But is that a bad thing? Is wanting to do your own take on something you like so wrong? No, absolutely not. Lawyers all over the world might disagree, but imitation isn't called the highest form of flattery for no reason, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Coromon appeared when it did. In 2013, Pokémon XY was released, and I consider it a turning point for the series. A point where the veterans either continued to enjoy the games, or started feeling disappointed with their beloved series, because it felt like the developers weren't always putting their best foot forward. The Pokemon franchise is backed by one of the richest entities on the planet, and it's clear that the brand is guaranteed to score big profits regardless of what they put out. So while they should be able to deliver something amazing, they're also free to outsource a low-effort piece of shit remake. So out comes Coromon, a game that promises a whole new world to live in, a number of improvements to a well-known formula, and some fantastic sprite work. It appeals to me because it seeks to build upon Generation 5, which was the last time that I felt the mainline series was truly amazing, rather than a frustrating sequence of compromises. I don't think it's a coincidence that there are more monster taming games popping out now, and that many of the people working on them have some history with Pokemon. There's a growing audience of people like me, old men yelling at the clouds because they want their favorite children's game to be better. I also feel that Coromon delivers hard on the monster designs, both in concept and in execution, with some really well animated sprites. Many of them pass my personal ideals for what is cool with a perfect grade. They're stylized animals, infused with fantasy, but without exaggerating the proportions or colors. The only flaw, I guess, is that there are only 114 Coromon in total, and because the vast majority are part of a 2 or 3 stage evolutionary line, it feels like you've exhausted the designs after the middle point of the story. Technically, there are more than 120, but that's counting the Titans and a handful of special variants. There also exists a few Coromon that were scrapped for the full release, but which presumably will be brought back in future updates. But having gone through this entire rant, does Coromon actually fix the problems? Yes, but also no. Coromon is a game that starts very strong, and then slowly descends into being aggressively average before blowing up in your face with an ending that leaves me about as satisfied as working at McDonald's. You run through a small dungeon with nothing besides random encounters, fight a titan, and hey, everything's okay now, thanks for playing, go do something else. It's so ridiculously rushed that I can't imagine it was intentional. And well, it turns out that it was rushed. The rest of the story does better, but still falters due to the pacing getting ground to a halt at multiple points. The puzzles are the biggest culprit here, because while many of them are fine, some of them are just trial and error, so even a peanut brain like me can brute force his way through them. Some even aspire to testing your reflexes, which is always fun when the controls haven't been designed with that kind of precision in mind. And then you have those puzzles that are just so mind-numbingly boring, like that entire section with Light Sensei where you're forced to backtrack multiple times and to play minigames that don't challenge you in any way. They just feel like a waste of time. The developers also took inspiration from Golden Sun, and you can certainly pinpoint that inspiration. Not just because of the magic hands, but also because many of the puzzles don't test your logic skills as much as they test your patience. Forced stealth sections, my favorite. Titan battles can also be a slog sometimes, much thanks to mindless item spam not only being practically required, but even encouraged. Not being limited by the conventions of regular battles is all fine and dandy, but sometimes it just feels like cheap shots rather than a legitimate challenge. The Pure Essence abilities allowed them to do stuff like recovering their status for free, or freezing your entire party out of nowhere, which isn't hard to overcome since they only trigger once per battle, and it just requires you to spend a few turns abusing recovery items. Effects like burning and bleeding also do piss all against them, so I hope you didn't plan on using those. Illusion is a pretty noteworthy roadblock, because it has a ton of HP, powerful attacks, and can put 2 of your Coromon to sleep in a single turn. After countless turns, slowly grinding him down to 0 HP, He just casually recovered half of it and healed all of the status conditions and debuffs I threw at him. I'm pretty sure that was the exact moment when my enthusiasm dropped into the fires of hell. So what did I do to beat this bastard? Well, I spammed accuracy lowering moves and RNG'd my way through this and the rest of the Titan battles. Welcome to game design. Now let's talk about types. It seems that limiting Coromon to a single type might have resulted in a lack of strategical variety. Without dual types, you have no interesting combinations to deal with. There's no difference in how you deal with a turtle, a bird, or a pile of rocks if they're all just fire types. There's a good amount of variety in the range of skill types that can be learned by each Coromon. But when all enemies in one area can be neutralized in the same way, it incentivizes the player to use a single Coromon to coast through. I'm also not sure if there was any necessity to make 6 types be skill exclusive, because there's a thing called type proficiency, which means that when a Coromon uses a skill of its own type, that skill gains an extra 25% power. You would imagine that the skill-exclusive types would be more powerful, or have some innate advantage to counterbalance this, but they don't. At this point, restructuring the game to support dual types just isn't feasible without a massive overhaul to the game's balancing. But I think an interesting compromise would be to give some Coromon a second type, but specifically from the move-exclusive ones. It would add purpose to those 6 types, rather than being rendered inferior because they can't benefit from type proficiency. The potential system also only fixes half of the individual value/effort value problem. Effort values are now a simple but intuitive point distribution system that you can easily reset. But the individual values part is arguably even worse, because Pokemon at least has breeding mechanics that let you pass down IVs, while potential is entirely random, and the chance for a perfect Coromon is pretty low, let's just put it that way. All you can do to improve it is to use the Potentivator, which can only be done once and only increases the value to 21 if you also get very lucky with it. This isn't a step forward, it's just a sidestep. That said, how much does this actually matter in practice? For me at least, not much. You don't need to min-max the system to beat the game, and one of the post-launch updates made it so that Coromon are treated as if they have perfect potential during multiplayer battles. So besides grinding levels to learn new moves, there isn't much of a grind if you want to play competitively. Assuming you can find an opponent anyway. Finally, there's a technical problem with the visuals. It's superficial, but still quite noticeable. See how stuttery this looks? That's not the recording, that's how the game looks. For some reason, the camera is incredibly choppy, especially when running. I've tried playing the game in windowed mode, I've tried forcing VSync, I've tried a framerate limiter, I've tried all kinds of things to fix this, but nothing worked. The camera scrolling is just borked, and I'm not the only one with this problem. I've noticed that the frame rate takes a dump whenever there's nothing moving, so maybe it's some sort of power-saving feature that's meant for the mobile version. Maybe it's because the game's frame rate cap is 64 instead of 60. I don't know. What I do know is that this was a problem with the demo all the way back in January of 2020, and I am disappointed and perplexed to see that it still hasn't been fixed. Sure, it doesn't happen in battles, and Coromon is a turn-based game, so it doesn't impact the gameplay. But it does impact the game's entire presentation, and it's a shame to see all that work go to waste because the game fumbled on something as basic as the scrolling. And speaking of things that you would expect would have been fixed in all this time, the game still doesn't have an option to turn off battle animations, and over time it really adds up. It's so strange to see these problems when the developers are clearly concerned with making the game as polished as possible, and with giving the player a choice in how they play through the game. It gives you the option to customize the difficulty right at the start, and it includes support for challenges like nuzlockes and randomization right out of the gate. But look, that's superficial stuff that might be easily fixed. Some of the puzzles and mechanics, not so much. That would take some serious work, but hopefully those shortcomings will be remedied in the future. When you're just running around and exploring the world, discovering new Coromon and racing your party, it's great, I genuinely love it. It's just that parts of it drag the experience down by a non-negligible amount. The dumb puzzles, the dialogue that isn't as funny as it thinks it is, the drawn-out dungeons and titans. Sometimes it almost feels like padding, to make sure that the game is 20 hours long instead of 10. For now at least, there's a demo you can easily download on Steam, which I suggest trying out for yourself. Despite all that smack talk, Coromon is most definitely worth checking out if you're looking for a monster taming game in the vein of Pokemon.